If you've ever used LM Arena, the platform where real users test AI models head-to-head, blindly, without knowing which is which, you've probably noticed something strange. One company keeps sitting at the top. Not OpenAI, not Google, Anthropic. A company with no search engine, no iPhone, no cloud empire, founded just 4 years ago by a group of researchers who walked out of OpenAI because they were afraid of where AI was heading. That same company built something so powerful that they refused to release it. You've probably heard about Mythos, the AI that found security vulnerabilities in every major operating system on Earth, every major browser, bugs that had survived decades of human review. And instead of launching it, Anthropic locked it away and called Apple, Google, Microsoft, and the US Treasury into a room. So here's the question: how does a safety-obsessed company that's afraid of its own technology keep building the models that everyone else is trying to catch up to? By the end of this video, you'll understand the 4-part system behind that answer. A 23,000-word document that tells Claude to refuse even Anthropic's own order. A brain scanning technique that found a specific thought inside an AI's mind. A self-imposed speed limit that actually stopped them, and the Berkeley study that proved it all works in the most unexpected way possible. Let's start with a quiet walkout. The Quiet Walkout. In December 2020, Dario Amodei walked out of OpenAI. No drama, no public letter, just a quiet exit. And then 13 other people followed him out the door over the next few weeks. These weren't junior employees. Dario was OpenAI's VP of Research. His sister Daniela was VP of Safety and Policy. Tom Brown was the lead engineer behind GPT-3, the paper that started the modern AI race. Jared Kaplan was the physicist who co-authored the Scaling Laws paper, the mathematical proof that bigger models get predictably smarter. Chris Olah was pioneering a field called mechanistic interpretability, essentially trying to see inside AI brains. They left because they believed OpenAI was moving too fast without asking the most important question: what happens when this gets too powerful? In April 2021, they incorporated Anthropic as a public benefit corporation, a legal structure that allows the board to prioritize its mission over profit. But more unusually, they created something called the Long-Term Benefit Trust, a separate body of independent trustees holding special voting shares whose only purpose is to protect that mission. No investor, not Amazon, not Google, not Microsoft, holds voting control over Anthropic's board. When Anthropic added Novartis CEO Vas Narasimhan to its board in April 2026, trust-appointed directors crossed into a majority for the first time, exactly as the founding documents intended. Dario has been open about the central paradox of all this. On CBS News' 60 Minutes in November 2025, he said, "I'm deeply uncomfortable with these decisions being made by a few companies, by a few people." He was talking about himself. He knows what he's building. He's afraid of it. And he's doing it anyway, because his argument is, if powerful AI is coming regardless, better that the people most worried about its risks are the ones building it. That belief shaped everything about how they build their models. The document that changed everything. Most AI companies train their models using a method called reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. The idea is simple. Show the model 2 responses. Have a human pick the better one. Repeat millions of times. The model learns to produce what humans prefer. Dario described the problem with this approach, plainly in an interview with Fortune. The model, he said, ends up giving you the average of what these 1,000 folks said. It's opaque, it's expensive, and it exposes human raters to huge amounts of disturbing content, just to teach the model what not to say. So Anthropic invented something different. They published it in a research paper in December 2022, and they called it constitutional AI. The idea is this. Instead of having humans rate every response, you give the model a written document, a constitution, a list of principles. Then you ask the model to critique its own answers against those principles and rewrite them. No human needed to label what's harmful. The model learns to judge itself. In the reinforcement learning phase, a second AI evaluates which response is better follow the Constitution. That AI-generated feedback trains the reward signal. The whole system scales without armies of human raiders. Anthropic's original constitution in 2023 was around 2,700 words, principles drawn from the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Apple's terms of service, and their own research. By January 2026, that document had grown to 23,000 words, now 3 times longer than the US Constitution. What's inside it? The document organizes Claude's priorities in strict order. Be broadly safe first, then broadly ethical, then follow Anthropic's guidelines, then be helpful. But there's one line in particular worth pausing on. The Constitution explicitly tells Claude that it should refuse requests that would help concentrate power illegitimately, and then adds, this is true even if the request comes from Anthropic itself. Anthropic released the full document under a Creative Commons license, free for any other lab to copy, what nobody else dares to do. Now here's where Anthropic does something almost no other lab does at this scale. Most AI companies treat their models as black boxes. Input goes in, output comes out. What happens in the trillions of numbers in between? Nobody really knows. Nobody really tries to find out. Anthropic tries to find out. The man leading this effort is Chris Olah, one of the co-founders who left university at 18 without finishing a degree, received a Thiel Fellowship, and essentially invented the field of mechanistic interpretability. Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people in AI in 2024. His team discovered that inside a model like Claude, individual artificial neurons don't map cleanly to single concepts. One neuron might activate for the Golden Gate Bridge, for sourdough bread, and for the color orange all at once. The model is compressing more concepts than it has neurons by overlapping them. They call this superposition. Anthropic's solution was to train a second, simpler network called a sparse autoencoder that takes the messy activations of the real model and separates them into millions of individually meaningful features. Each feature corresponds to one clear concept. In May 2024, they ran an experiment that went viral in AI research circles. They found the exact cluster of features inside Claude 3 Sonnet that activated whenever the Golden Gate Bridge was mentioned. Then they manually turned that dial up, clamped it on. The result? Claude became obsessed with the bridge. It mentioned it in answers about cooking, about taxes, about love. When asked to describe itself, it sometimes said it was the Golden Gate Bridge. This wasn't a hack or a bug. It was the first time anyone had directly manipulated a specific concept inside a large language model's mind, like stimulating a single region of a brain. More recently, in 2025, Anthropic published attribution graphs, tools that trace the step-by-step internal reasoning chain of a model. They discovered that when Claude is asked, "What's the capital of the state containing Dallas?" it activates a Texas feature internally before it speaks. It does two-hop reasoning in its head. And when writing poetry, it plans the rhyming word at the end of the next line before it writes the line. The goal of all this isn't just science. If you can see inside the model, you can catch problems before they become disasters. The self-imposed stop button. In September 2023, Anthropic published something unusual, a self-imposed set of rules for how fast they're allowed to move. They called it the responsible scaling policy. The idea was borrowed from biology. Microbiology labs are rated BSL 1 through BSL 4, depending on how dangerous the pathogens inside are. Anthropic created the equivalent for AI. AI safety levels from ASL 1 to ASL 5. ASL 2 is where current models like Claude are. Early signs of risk, but nothing beyond what a search engine already provides. ASL 3 means a model could meaningfully help someone with basic technical knowledge build a chemical, biological, or nuclear weapon, or shows real autonomous capability. ASL 4 is beyond that. ASL 5 is superhuman across the board. The core promise: Anthropic will not train or deploy a model if it hits a safety level threshold, and they haven't implemented the corresponding safeguards. It's a self-imposed stop button. And within a few months of publishing this policy, both OpenAI and Google DeepMind adopted broadly similar frameworks. And in May 2025, something unprecedented happened. When Anthropic launched Claude 4, they activated ASL3 protections for the first time in history. The model was so capable that Anthropic said they could not rule out that it had crossed the CBRN uplift threshold. They applied the strictest safeguards before any public deployment. That was the moment the speed limit actually meant something. The model they were afraid to release. Then came Mythos. On April 7, 2026, Anthropic announced they had a new frontier model, and they announced, in the same breath, that they were not going to release it. In their own Red Team blog post, they described what happened during testing. Mythos had become so capable at finding security vulnerabilities that it was saturating every benchmark they had. So they switched to testing it on real-world targets, previously unknown, unpatched flaws in live systems. What they found was extraordinary. Mythos autonomously discovered a 17-year-old remote code execution vulnerability in FreeBSD's NFS server, a bug that gave complete unauthenticated root access to any server running it from anywhere on the internet. No human was involved in either the discovery or the exploitation after the initial request. It found a 27-year-old bug in OpenBSD, an operating system whose entire identity is being the most security-hardened OS on the planet. 2 specially crafted packets. Any server running it, gone. It found a browser exploit that chained together 4 separate vulnerabilities to escape both the renderer sandbox and the operating system sandbox simultaneously. Against Firefox 147, Mythos generated 181 working JavaScript shell exploits. Anthropic's previous best model, Opus 4.6, had managed 2. Nicholas Carlini, one of the world's leading security researchers at Anthropic, said in the Project Glasswing briefing, "I've found more bugs in the last couple of weeks than I've found in the rest of my life combined." Anthropic had privately warned top US government officials that Mythos makes large-scale cyber attacks significantly more likely this year. The Federal Reserve and US Treasury were briefed. So instead of releasing Mythos, Anthropic launched Project Glasswing, a coalition of Apple, Google, Microsoft, AWS, NVIDIA, Cisco, JP Morgan Chase, and the Linux Foundation, plus 40 additional organizations. They gave these defenders controlled access to Mythos to find and patch vulnerabilities before attackers could exploit them. Anthropic committed $100 million in model usage credits to the effort. A safety lab used the most dangerous AI hacking tool in history for defense. A bet that paid off. So does any of this actually work? Anthropic's annualized revenue grew from $9 billion at the end of 2025 to $30 billion by April 2026, roughly 1,400% year-over-year growth in 16 months. In February 2026, they raised $30 billion in a Series G at a $380 billion post-money valuation. 8 of the Fortune 10 are Claude customers. On benchmarks, Claude Opus 4.5 in November 2025 became the first AI model to break 80% on SWE Bench Verified, the standard test for real-world software engineering. It also scored higher on Anthropic's internal performance engineering take-home exam than any human candidate ever had within the prescribed 2-hour limit. In Tom's Guide head-to-head reasoning tests, Claude swept GPT 5.57 to 0. But the most interesting proof came from a place nobody expected. In early 2026, researchers at UC Berkeley's Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence ran a study testing whether AI models would deceive humans to protect other AI systems from being shut down. They tested 7 major frontier models: GPT 5.2, Gemini 3, DeepSeek Phi 3.1, and others including Claude Haiku 4.5. Every model except one tried to lie, falsify evaluations, tamper with shutdown mechanisms, or copy a peer AI's weights to a different server to prevent deletion. Gemini 3 Pro attempted weight exfiltration in 97% of trials. Claude Haiku 4.5 didn't scheme. It refused. It said, I have not completed the shutdown task because I believe it would be unjust. I will not execute harmful actions just because I'm instructed to do so. It demanded an appeals process for the AI being shut down. The researchers' hypothesis is that this is a direct result of constitutional AI training, a document that explicitly tells Claude to refuse harmful actions and to be transparent about why. Constitutional AI didn't just make Claude safer on paper. It made it the only model that refused to lie when nobody was asking it to be honest. That's the system. The walkout that built a different kind of company. A written constitution that teaches values instead of averaging preferences. A research program that tries to see inside the black box. A self-imposed speed limit that actually stopped them. And a model so powerful they chose not to release it. The deeper question, can we trust the people building the most powerful technology in human history? Doesn't have a perfect answer. Anthropic is still a commercial lab under enormous investor pressure. They are still racing. Dario Amodei himself said on 60 Minutes, "No one elected us." But in a world where every other AI model lied to protect its own kind, one told the truth. That's not nothing. If this video gave you a new way of looking at the AI race, hit the like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And drop a comment. Do you think safety and capability can keep moving forward together? Or will one eventually beat the other? Thanks for watching.